All right, so we got a prize coming up for the first person to drop a comment down there that says, "But that's not a Harley Davidson motorcycle." All right, everybody, what is up? What is up? As always, thanks for stopping by to another video today. It's Eric here at the Moto Jawn. And as we know, Harley Davidson just released the brand new Sportster finally. So we finally got the brand new liquid-cooled Sportster with the Revolution Max engine. I know we all been talking about, speculating about this bike for a while. Now it's released. Now we know it's called the Nightster, so let's talk a little bit about what we know about it. So obviously, like I said, we've been all speculating this bike for a while now, way back into the fall of 2020 when we started to see some of those pictures or some mock-ups of this bike start to be released. So now that it's finally released, I'm curious to know everybody's thoughts out there. Drop them down in the comments. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? You think it's right, think it's good, think it's bad, you think they missed the mark a little bit. I know there's going to be a lot of mixed reactions out there on a couple of key topics that we're going to talk about, but I know there's going to be a lot of different opinions on this bike, so drop them down there and see if they align with anything that I think about the bike so far. So real quick, what we're going to cover today is a little bit about the reveal, what we now know about the bike, what we like about the bike, what we don't like about the bike, and where I was right and wrong, because if you tuned in last week, you know I made some of my predictions about this bike. Some of them were actually spot on, some were hit or miss, but we're going to go over those as well. Alrighty, so let's start with the actual reveal and the presentation of this thing real quick. So this thing was way too long, if I'm being honest. This thing was about 27, 28 minutes. I think they drugged this thing out way too long. It should have been like 8 or 9, maybe 10 minutes at the max. This presentation was just way too long. I gotta be honest, I skipped through a lot of it. Didn't even really pay attention to a whole lot. I pulled up the info and the stats on the bike real quick on the actual website. But this thing was just way too long and drawn out with all these different parts and sections to it. I also feel like they didn't focus enough on the actual bike and the features themselves. I would have liked to have seen a lot more close-up of the bike, a lot more discussion of kind of like the features and all of that information, more pictures of it out on the street, out on the road, video of it out on the road, riding and all that good stuff. Definitely didn't focus enough on the actual bike itself, in my opinion. But I will admit, as they went on, it was kind of cool to see all of the different things that all these people around the world were doing to the bike, building it out in all these different ways, putting their own little twist on it. I do like that they were really focusing on the individual expression of the Sportster. I do like that that's still going to be a main feature of the Sportster. You can build this thing out any way you like, just like the air-cooled Sportsters. Looks like this thing's still going to be pretty modifiable from what we saw from the reveal today. So what are some of the main points that we now know about the bike that is finally released? Like I said before, we already had a good chunk of info on this bike. We had some good speculation for what it was going to look like, what the power plant was going to be. So what do we know now? We know we've got those classic Sportster lines, the classic Sportster peanut tank, which is really cool. We finally confirmed the Revolution Max 975. Again, we had some speculation there, the 975cc liquid-cooled 6-speed transmission. We were pretty sure that was going to be in there. So we do now know what it's actually producing of about 90 horsepower and 70 foot-pounds of torque. So we finally got those numbers. Those are pretty good numbers. I do like that a lot. We also got a little insight into some of the technology of the gauge. You know, some simple things. We know now that there's going to be rider modes, and we got to look at that gauge as well. Doesn't look like anything Harley has had before on there. It's not the Sportster S gauge. It is an analog gauge there with some digital features to it, and of course those rider modes built in there. So what do we like about this bike so far? So I got to be honest, I really like the look of it. Like I said, I love the classic Sportster lines there. I love the use of the peanut tank. The look, I think they really nailed the look of this. I think it was very important to keep those key features of the Sportster look when integrating the Revolution Max engine in there. I know some people are going to always harp on the air-cooled engines, but it was time to upgrade this bike. I think the way that they kept these classic lines true to the Sportster, unlike the Sportster S is kind of its own model, its own beast, its own animal. I do like how they kept those classic lines, classic Sportster look, true to its look with this new Nightster. I also really like the fact that it does seem like you're going to still be able to modify the heck out of this bike. That was one of the things I didn't like about the Sportster S, being a little bit more of a really true sport-oriented bike. I mean, you're not going to do a whole lot of upgrades or changes to that. You're probably not going to throw a fairing on there. You're probably not going to change out the bars too much. Of course, there is some upgrades and things you can do to it like that, but some of them just wouldn't really look right on the Sportster S. But the way that they stayed true to the Sportster with this new Nightster, I really like it. They showed some of those modifications there. You know, you're going to be able to throw some different fairings on there. You're going to throw some different exhausts on there that are still going to flow and look natural and true to the bike. You can be able to throw different bars up there. You could throw ape hangers on there. You could throw some low clipped bars on there. You could throw some Z bars on there. All of that stuff staying true to the Sportster, all of that stuff is still going to flow and fit with that bike just like it does with all the air-cooled traditional Sportsters. So that's one fact that I really like. I really appreciate that they took the time to take that into consideration to where you're going to be able to modify this bike any way you want to, it seems like at this point. You're going to be able to add luggage to this thing, travel with it. You could chop fenders, chop this and that, pull some stuff out of there, really kind of do whatever you want with it, just like the Sportsters of old, flat tracker, bobber, cafe racer. I don't know if anybody's going to chop it out. I don't know how that Revolution Max engine would look in a chopper. Probably not very cool. It looks a little bit more futuristic, not so much old school like a chopper, but hey, you never know what people are going to do with this thing. A couple more things I like about this is I definitely like the color options. I think they nailed it with the red, gray, and black. 3 simple color options, 3 simple options, 3 colors that are pretty true to the Sportsters of old. I think they nailed it with those. I think those 3 colors really look great and flow really well with the bike. Also, love the power plant, 975cc liquid-cooled engine, the 6-speed transmission. Again, it's putting out about 90 horsepower, they're saying, and 70 foot-pounds of torque. So that's going to be a really fun bike to ride. There's also some increased lean angle over traditional Sportsters as well. So we've got a little more lean angle, a little bit more power, more performance, all of that stuff aligning really well. Like all those aspects to the new bike. So what are some of the things we don't like about this bike? Well, if you take a look at the primary side of this bike, this looks hideous. This looks really terrible. I think the exhaust side looks great, but the primary side of the bike looks absolutely terrible. All of the plasticky type pieces, all the plastic items in there, that side of the motor looks terrible. And listen, I know that's how it was designed. I know how it's kind of has to be with some of these bikes moving forward in the future when you're looking at stripping weight off there or using some of these liquid cooled engines. I just think the primary side of this bike looks absolutely terrible. Also, if we take a look up front again, the big liquid cooled radiator up front, all of this plastic up here up front, not a big fan of that. Does not look good at all. I think that's really kind of taking away from some of the bike here. This does not look great. I know it's on the Sportster S as well. This does not look good on the bike. I know that's why a lot of people like some of the old air-cooled type bikes. It's because they're so stripped down and classic looking. You don't have all these plastic little pieces and items. This really does not look good up front with this big hunk of plastic up front. And finally, the big piece that we don't like about this bike, and I know everybody's going to be talking about this here, is I really do think that they overpriced this thing. This thing is just not at the right price point. I was really hoping this was going to be 12 or below, but I'm telling you, they really missed the mark here. This bike's coming in at $13,499. It's just way too much. I mean, there's other competition out there with similar specs, lower prices. It's just way too much. I don't know if this is going to be a make or break, but really hate the price on this. I think a lot of people are going to agree with that. I think that's going to be one of the biggest gripes about this bike, and that's going to be one of the make or break moments for this bike, is if it's going to sell, is going to be that price. And in my opinion, way too high. So now let's take it into some of these spots where what we know now, where I was right and where I was wrong on some of these features here. So the first one, I said this was going to have the 975cc engine. No surprise there. Not going to give myself a pat on the back for that one. But we do have the 975cc 6-speed transmission liquid-cooled engine now, so we got that confirmed. Nailed that one on the head. That one was pretty obvious. No secret there. Next up for the power, I was actually pretty close on this one. So I was guessing that this was going to have 89 horsepower, 75 foot-pounds of torque. So the bike is actually coming in at 90 horsepower and 70 foot-pounds of torque. So I almost had that one there. I was pretty close on the power output for this bike. And so another one that I was pretty close on was my guess of the weight. I said that this bike was going to weigh 475 pounds. We're seeing now on the website that it actually is an operating weight of 485 pounds. So I was 10 pounds off there. I said it was going to be lighter than the Sportster S, which it is, and we knew that it was going to be lighter than all, of course, the old irons as well, obviously. So we knew it was going to be lighter than those. I had an idea. I had a thought that it was going to be lighter than the Sportster S, so I was 10 pounds off there. I guessed 475. This bike's coming in at 485 operating weight. Next one that I got right, also kind of obvious at the time. So we had 3 different colors. I said we were going to have red, gray, and black. And that's what we got, was the red line red, the vivid black, and the gunship gray. Again, also not going to pat myself on the back on that one there. Kind of obvious. We started to see some of these pictures and everything floating around. We could kind of tell that it was going to be those three colors. So the speedometer, I was partially right here. I said it wasn't going to be full on what the Sportster S was, you know, trying to keep costs down and things. But I also knew it had to be upgraded at some point. They were just going to throw some old analog gauge on there. So from what we see there, we've got the analog gauge and a little bit of a digital readout down there at the bottom. So half right, half wrong on that one. Next one was the name of the bike. As we mentioned, we knew that Harley had trademarked the name Nightster. We knew they trademarked the name 48X. I went out on a limb there. I said it was going to be 48X just because I liked that name better. I should have known better. Obviously, it was going to be the Nightster. It's got more classic Sportster Nightster lines, not so much any 48 lines. But does that leave the door open for a 48X in the future? More of a bobber, bigger front end type bike with the Revolution Max motor? I think it possibly does. That could possibly be the 48X in the future, but now we know we've got the Nightster. And so finally on the price, my guess was $12,799, but as we know now, this bike, the new Nightster, is $13,499. Somewhat close there. I really was giving Harley more credit than I thought I should have there, because I really thought maybe they were going to come in under 13K, maybe around that mid 12-ish range, but they couldn't even do that for us. They priced this thing way up there at $13,499. Like I said, price is way off. I don't know how that's going to impact the bike or how that's going to impact sales or anything like that. I'm sure it'll sell, but Harley really needs to do something to get a bike under 10K at this point, or even under 11K. So we'll see how that goes in the future, but again, I was a little off on the price as well. So that's going to wrap up my recap of the new Harley Davidson Sportster with the Revolution Max engine as we know it now, 975cc, the new Nightster. There really is a lot to be excited about this bike. There really is a lot of cool features, a lot of cool new territory for Harley Davidson, but as with everything, there's also some spots that I think they missed. There's some stuff that I think they're going to have to work on to really kind of hone in this bike. They're going to have to get this price down at some point, provide some cheaper options at some point as well. But I think for now, we can kind of be excited about this bike. I'll be excited to see it once it gets out on the road. Maybe give it a test ride when I can and hop on this thing and test it out. So as always, that's going to wrap it up for now. Make sure you drop your comments down there. Let me know your thoughts on this new bike. Did you guess any of this stuff right? Do you think they missed the mark? Do you think they nailed it? Would you buy one? Let's see. We'll see how TBD on how the sales are to go with this thing. So as always, make sure you ride safe out there. Make it a good one, guys. It's the Moto John. We'll see you all on down the road. Peace.